My brother keeps sneaking peeks under my clothes, and my mom does nothing about it. I'm fed up. My brother has been sneaking peeks under my clothes for so long, and every time I catch him, my mom just ignores it like it's nothing. It's beyond frustrating. I had been pushing myself hard for days, weeks even. Late nights filled with assignments and early mornings spent staring at my textbooks, barely staying awake. I had no choice but to work through the exhaustion. But that night, I had finally found a moment of peace. At least I thought I had. I had fallen asleep on the couch, my body aching from the stress and lack of sleep. My head was heavy, and I had no idea how long I had been out, but it was probably longer than I should have let myself rest. Still, I couldn't help but give in to the weariness. I had barely caught any sleep over the past few days, and the weight of my stress was pulling me under. But then I woke up to a sensation I couldn't ignore, a chill that ran through me the second I opened my eyes. The silence in the room felt wrong. My mind was foggy at first, still disoriented from sleep, but when I focused, I felt it. I saw him, my brother, right there in front of me, trying to lift my dress. My body froze as I processed what was happening. He wasn't just casually standing nearby or looking at me. He was trying to pull the fabric of my dress up inch by inch, clearly trying to get a peek at my underwear. His fingers were barely brushing against the fabric, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. My heart raced and my stomach flipped over. I didn't know what to do, how to react. I was too shocked at first to move. But then the reality of what he was doing hit me hard. I couldn't believe it again. This wasn't the first time he had done something like this, but it was the first time I had caught him red-handed. And I couldn't just pretend it wasn't happening. In a blur of rage and disbelief, I jumped to my feet and shouted at him, "What the hell are you doing?" The words barely left my mouth before he froze. His eyes widened, and for a split second I thought he might apologize, maybe even show some sign of guilt. But instead, he did what he always did. He tried to play it off. He didn't even look at me as he moved away, acting as though nothing had happened. Before I could even process the scene, he casually tried to start a conversation with my mother, who was sitting in the living room. It was as though he wasn't aware of the magnitude of what he had just done. He just walked away. No shame, no regret. I couldn't stand it. I knew I had to confront this. I couldn't stay silent any longer, not when it was happening right under my nose, and not when I had already warned my mother about his behavior in the past. I stormed up to her, my hands trembling from anger and frustration. "Mom, you won't believe what he just did." I tried to explain everything as calmly as I could, but inside, I was seething. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just curiosity. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was doing it again, sneaking around, invading my space, violating my privacy. When I told my mother what had happened, I felt a wave of anger rush over me as she turned to me unbothered. "Did he do that?" she asked with a tone that lacked the concern I had expected. "No, Mom. He didn't do anything," he said with a blank expression, almost like he was challenging my reality. I stood there stunned. "What do you mean, no?" "I saw you." I started, but I couldn't even finish my sentence. The words felt like they were stuck in my throat. He had just been caught in the act, and now he was denying it outright as if it never happened. I didn't know whether to laugh in disbelief or scream in frustration. "Mom." I continued, trying to hold back tears. "You saw it too." He was trying to pull my dress up, but all she did was look at me with an exasperated sigh, as if I was the one causing trouble. "You need to calm down," she said dismissively. "You're being too dramatic." I couldn't believe it. The anger I felt was rising to a boiling point. I wanted to yell, to shake her and make her understand, but something stopped me. What was the point? She had already chosen to ignore it before. Why would this time be different? That was when the sinking feeling in my chest grew deeper. I had already told her about my brother's behavior in the past. He'd done it before. Sneaked peeks tried to invade my space when I wasn't paying attention, but every time my mother acted like it was nothing. Every time she brushed it off as though it was a phase or some harmless curiosity. She always had an excuse ready, and this time it was no different. I felt completely alone. No one was on my side, not even my own mother. I couldn't believe what was happening. I stood there trying to hold myself together, my heart pounding in my chest, as my mother gave me nothing but silence. Her face was unreadable, and her eyes didn't even meet mine. She just went back to whatever she was watching on her phone. It felt like I was invisible, like my feelings didn't matter in that moment. I stood there trying to process everything, trying to make sense of why she was acting like this. why she wasn't standing up for me. I needed her to understand to be on my side, but instead she treated the situation like a minor inconvenience, like I was the one overreacting. But I couldn't stay silent. I wasn't going to let this go. "Mom," I said again, my voice trembling with frustration, "you saw what he did. You can't just ignore this." She didn't look up. She just kept scrolling through her phone completely uninterested. The anger in me swelled, but so did the hurt. I wanted her to care. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't just something I could brush off. It was my body, my privacy, my safety, and he had violated it again. I was devastated. Every part of me felt hollow, as though this moment was just another piece of the puzzle that was slowly destroying any connection I thought I had with her. Was I asking too much? Was it unreasonable to expect my mother to protect me, to care enough about my well-being to actually do something? But she wasn't. She was defending him. "You're just being careless," she said, finally looking up from her phone, her words cutting through the silence. "If you had just woken up and eaten something like I told you, none of this would have happened." What was she really blaming me now? Was I the problem here? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was the one who had been violated. And yet she was shifting the blame onto me, acting like I was the one at fault for being tired, for being in my own house, for not being perfect. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't even process what she was saying. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "No, Mom. You're wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "It's not my fault. He did something wrong and you should be mad at him, not me." But it was like speaking to a brick wall. She didn't even seem to care. Her eyes drifted back down to her phone and I could feel my heart sink even further. My brother, meanwhile, had already settled himself back onto the couch, his eyes glued to his screen as though nothing had happened. Nothing at all. He wasn't even fazed. It was like we were all living in two different worlds. In my world, my personal space had been violated, my trust shattered. In his world, everything was fine. Everything was normal. And in my mother's world, I was the one who was being too dramatic. It was as if this was all a misunderstanding, an overblown situation that didn't require any action. My heart felt heavy as I stood there, unable to find the words to make her see. I wanted to scream, to demand that she wake up and realize what was going on. But I couldn't. She had already made her choice. She had already chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. I felt a pit in my stomach, an emptiness that only seemed to grow deeper with every passing second. I had been trying so hard to do the right thing, to protect myself and stand up for myself, but it felt like no one was willing to stand with me, not even my own mother. "Are we just going to ignore this?" I whispered, barely able to speak through the lump in my throat. But the room remained silent. She didn't respond. My brother didn't respond. No one did. I felt as though I had become invisible in my own home, my voice unheard, my pain unnoticed. And that was the hardest part. The silence. The complete and utter dismissal of what I had just gone through. I had caught him in the act, and I was now being made to feel like I was the one in the wrong for even bringing it up. I left the room feeling as if my soul had been crushed. There was no point in staying. No point in fighting for something that seemed impossible. I had already spent so many nights lying awake trying to convince myself that things would get better, that my mother would eventually see what was happening. But each day it became clearer that she wouldn't. She couldn't. I curled up in my bed, the tears I had been holding back finally escaping. My chest ached with the weight of everything I was carrying. The betrayal, the hurt, the exhaustion. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it was so obviously not. I just wanted peace. I wanted to feel safe in my own home again. But that seemed impossible as long as my mother continued to protect him and make excuses for his behavior. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them, the world would be different. But when I woke up the next morning, nothing had changed. It was still the same, and I was still stuck in this cycle of hurt and disappointment. The days following that night felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the weight of the events that had transpired. It was as if I were trapped in a never-ending cycle of disappointment and frustration. Each morning I woke up hoping for a change, but nothing ever did. My mother remained distant, her silence growing heavier with every passing day. And my brother, he acted as though nothing had happened at all, like it was business as usual. It was maddening. I found myself walking on eggshells around my own family. I couldn't even change my clothes in peace anymore without feeling the familiar prickle of unease crawling up my spine. Every time I moved, I was constantly aware of where he was, what he was doing. Could he be lurking nearby? Was he watching me again? Every corner of my own home felt like a battleground, and it was exhausting. But the hardest part by far was the way my mother continued to defend him. I had been holding on to a shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, she would come to her senses. That she would see how wrong he was and finally do something about it. But no, her stance never wavered. It was like she had made up her mind from the very beginning and nothing would change it. "You have to understand he has autism," she would say whenever I tried to bring it up. "He doesn't know better. He's just curious." Curious. My blood would boil every time I heard her say those words. It was as if she thought this was all some innocent mistake, some childish error that could be easily forgiven. But I knew better. He knew exactly what he was doing. If it was just curiosity, then why was he being so sneaky about it? Why was he trying to hide it from everyone? It felt like I was being gaslighted. My mother had completely dismissed my feelings, painting me as the one who was overreacting as though I was the problem. All because my brother had autism. It was like she thought that gave him a free pass to do whatever he wanted. And it wasn't just this incident. It was every time he crossed a boundary, every time he did something inappropriate, and every time she defended him, no matter how much it hurt me. I tried to talk to her about it to make her see that just because he had autism didn't mean he should be allowed to do whatever he wanted. I tried to explain that his actions had consequences and that it wasn't about his condition. It was about respect. Respect for me, respect for my privacy. But no matter how I tried to make her understand, it always came back to the same thing. He's just curious. It's not his fault. It felt like a slap in the face every time. I was being told to tolerate his behavior, to let it slide because of his condition. But where was my consideration? Where was my protection? It felt like I was the one being punished for something that wasn't even my fault. It wasn't my fault that he crossed the line. It wasn't my fault that I had been violated. But somehow in my mother's eyes, it was. Days turned into weeks, and my isolation only deepened. I couldn't talk to my mother about it anymore because she wasn't listening. I couldn't talk to my brother because he didn't care. I was left to suffer in silence, trying to hold everything together on my own. But the more I tried to cope, the more I realized just how alone I was in this. I began to question everything: my relationship with my mother, my brother's behavior, and my place in this family. Was I asking for too much? Was I being selfish by wanting respect? Was it unreasonable to want to feel safe in my own home? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I was tired. Tired of being the one who had to deal with the fallout of my brother's actions. Tired of being the one who had to beg for my mother's support. Tired of being made to feel like I was the problem. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I had been holding everything inside for so long, and the weight of it all finally broke me. I found myself in tears, overwhelmed by the emotions that I had been suppressing for so long. I had tried so hard to be strong, to keep everything together, but I couldn't do it anymore. I called my best friend, desperate for someone to talk to. She picked up almost immediately, sensing the urgency in my voice. "What's wrong?" she asked, concern laced in her words. And that was when I finally broke down. I told her everything: how my brother had violated my space, how my mother had dismissed my feelings, how I was left feeling so alone in all of it. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking. "I just don't know anymore." She listened patiently, her voice soft and comforting as she reassured me that I wasn't alone. "You don't deserve this," she said. "No one should make you feel like this." Her words were a balm to my broken soul. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone understood. I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. I wasn't overreacting. I had a right to be upset, to be angry, and to demand respect. But even with her support, I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. My mother's bias, her unwavering defense of my brother, was like a heavy chain around my neck, and I had no idea how to break free. The days following that emotional breakdown felt like I was trapped in an endless cycle of frustration. I thought about the conversation with my best friend, and her words still echoed in my mind. "You don't deserve this." It gave me some comfort, but it didn't change the reality I was living. I still felt powerless, still trapped in a situation where my voice seemed to mean nothing. My brother's actions were still being brushed aside, and I was beginning to wonder if I would ever be able to stand up for myself without feeling guilty or unheard. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in the living room, lost in my thoughts. My mother was in the kitchen humming to herself, and my brother was lounging on the couch, eyes glued to his phone as always. It felt like another normal day, but I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that nothing had changed. That nothing would ever change. I had tried talking to my mother countless times, but each attempt was met with indifference or excuses. She still defended my brother and I still felt invisible. This time, though, I decided I wasn't going to stay silent. I had reached my breaking point, and I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to make my mother see that this wasn't just about my brother's condition, it was about respect boundaries and what was right. I had to stand up for myself, even if it felt impossible. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was preparing dinner. She looked up at me with that same detached expression she always had whenever I tried to talk to her about my brother. But this time, I wasn't going to let her brush me off. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." She sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel, clearly annoyed. "What is it now?" she asked, her tone dismissive. I took a deep breath. I'm tired of being ignored. I'm tired of being told that I'm overreacting. I'm tired of being made to feel like I'm the problem here when I'm not. Her eyes flickered with something that almost resembled guilt, but she quickly masked it with her usual indifference. "I've already told you he doesn't understand," she said, brushing it off again. "No, Mom," I said, my voice growing firmer. "He knows what he's doing. If it was just curiosity, he wouldn't have tried to hide it. He wouldn't have done it behind my back. He knows it's wrong, and you need to stop making excuses for him." I could see her starting to get defensive, but I wasn't backing down this time. "I've told you over and over again that I feel violated, that I feel unsafe in my own home, and every single time you defend him, you make me feel like I'm the one who's wrong." "I'm not saying you're wrong," she muttered, but I could hear the irritation in her voice. "You are, though," I said, feeling a surge of frustration bubble up inside me. "You're treating me like my feelings don't matter. You're acting like he's untouchable just because he has autism. But that doesn't make his actions okay. It doesn't make it right for him to invade my space without my consent." She crossed her arms, looking down at the counter. "I'm just trying to make sure you understand him," she said, her voice softer, but still defensive. "He doesn't know any better. He doesn't know that what he's doing is wrong." "Yes, he does," I almost shouted before taking a step back and composing myself. "He's old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. You're the one who's ignoring the truth." I could feel the anger rising in me. I had never been so frustrated in my life. Every word I said felt like a plea for help, yet all I received in return was silence. I had become the enemy in my own home, the one who was causing all the tension. And the worst part was that my mother still couldn't see it. She still couldn't understand how much it hurt me to be treated this way. The conversation didn't go anywhere. She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge my pain, and didn't take my side. It was the same old story. She had made up her mind, and nothing I said was going to change that. It was as if I didn't even exist in her eyes. I walked away feeling defeated. Once again, I had tried to stand up for myself, and once again my voice had been drowned out by her apathy. I didn't know what to do anymore. I was stuck in this toxic cycle, and I didn't see a way out. My mother's bias was suffocating me, and no matter how many times I tried to make her see reason, nothing changed. Later that evening, I sat on my bed staring at the walls, lost in my thoughts. I could hear my brother in the living room laughing and talking like nothing had happened. And there I was, still grappling with the aftermath of yet another violation, still trying to figure out how to make things right. But there was no solution. No magic words that would fix everything. I was left with the painful realization that I couldn't change my mother's mind. No matter how hard I tried, she would always choose him over me. And that was the hardest part of all. Days passed, and it felt like I was living in a constant state of emotional exhaustion. The same pattern repeated itself over and over again. My brother's inappropriate behavior, my mother's defense of him, and my attempts to stand up for myself, only to be silenced by their apathy. I began to feel like I was invisible, like my feelings didn't matter, like I was living in a household where no one cared enough to listen to me. The worst part was how alone I felt. Even though I was surrounded by family, I couldn't shake the feeling that no one understood what I was going through. My friends tried to offer their support, but how could they truly understand the depths of the situation? No one could truly grasp how painful it was for me to feel violated in my own home by someone who should have respected me above all else. And no one could understand the toll it was taking on me mentally, physically, and emotionally. I wasn't just fighting for my boundaries. I was fighting for my peace of mind, my safety, and my dignity. But every time I spoke up, it felt like the universe was telling me to be quiet. Every time I tried to get my mother to see my side, I was met with excuses and denials. She just didn't get it. She didn't understand how her dismissiveness was breaking me down. One evening, after another frustrating exchange with my mother, I found myself sitting in the corner of my room, staring blankly at the wall. The weight of the situation was unbearable. I had already been emotionally drained from the years of constantly having to justify my feelings, but this felt like the final straw. I was losing hope. I was losing myself. I couldn't keep fighting like this. My energy was depleted. I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't just about my brother's behavior anymore. It was about the years of feeling unseen and unheard. The years of being told that my feelings didn't matter. The years of feeling like I was the one causing problems, when all I wanted was peace. But it wasn't just that. The pressure of everything was starting to weigh down on me. My academic struggles, the constant tension in the household, the way my body felt drained by everything, and the emotional toll this situation was taking, it all added up. It was too much to handle. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and saw a message from my friend. She had sent me a kind message offering her support. She had no idea how much I needed it right then. I smiled weakly as I read her words. "I'm here for you always. You deserve to feel safe and respected." But even though I appreciated her words, I couldn't escape the painful reality of my home. I couldn't escape the fact that no matter how much I tried, my mother was never going to see things my way. She was never going to believe me. She was never going to protect me from my brother's behavior. And that more than anything was crushing me. I looked around my room feeling trapped, and it suddenly hit me how suffocating this place had become. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get away from the constant tension, the endless disappointment. I needed to find a way out, even if it meant leaving everything behind. But I couldn't. Not yet. A voice inside me urged me to keep going. It told me that I couldn't let them break me, that I was stronger than this, even if I didn't feel it at the moment. But another part of me was too tired to fight. I was so sick of the constant battle, the constant need to prove that my feelings mattered. In the weeks that followed, I started withdrawing from everything. I stopped trying to have conversations with my mother. I stopped trying to confront my brother. The emotional exhaustion became too overwhelming. I realized that I had been holding on to hope for something that would never come. My mother's understanding, my brother's change, peace in my home. It was a sinking realization, one that made my heart feel heavy with grief. But deep down, I knew that it was time for me to let go. I had done everything I could. I had fought. I had spoken up, and I had tried to make them see my pain, but now all that was left was an aching sense of loss and frustration. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know if my brother would ever stop invading my space, or if my mother would ever change. But I knew one thing: I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. Something had to change. If you were as shocked and frustrated as I was, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more eye-opening stories like this. Stay tuned for more real-life drama, and make sure you don't miss any updates.